Jen Binford here, leaving the side door of United Methodist Church here in Boise, Idaho, called the Cathedral of the Rockies, where we live out the motto, all means all, where it's a place for all people to belong and experience the love of God and to really be a part of a family that seeks to live out what John Wesley would call individual piety as well as social piety, where we are devoted and committed to sanctification and living out the full meaning of salvation, as Wesley would talk about in his way of life, whether it's individually growing into wholeness or communally. And something I would like to show you is not just the building here, it's an entire city block, as you can see, as well as here's across the street where we have the parking lot, as well as an empty lot over there that will soon be developed into a greater parking lot area. And if you look across further out on this city block is the community garden, and here the community comes together to produce fruit, which I just absolutely love as an analogy of who we are as the body of Christ. And here in the community garden is where I've spent quite a bit of time with some of the unhoused population in our neighborhood that come to the Cathedral of the Rockies to experience a safe space and also to just be in the presence of people who show them value, which they're not used to, as you can imagine. And one of those neighbors here, her name is Heather, and Heather has spent much of her summertime in the garden weeding, and she also had her own plot where she was able to produce food that she was able to eat. And if you look here, you can see something else special across the street, which is my home where I live with my family. And this is a very unique lifestyle that we live. We are a family that is committed to not just living in this neighborhood, but living as a family who is a lighthouse, that we created a space and we intentionally chose to live in this house because it is right in the heart of Boise, Idaho. It is a block from the high school and a block from the middle school. And we chose to have our home here as a gathering space that is safe for teenagers in particularly, but also for the community just in general. And I am super fascinated with one piece of Methodist history, and that is of the orphan house and the foundry and the new room. And that is because the philosophy or the pedagogy behind the way that these spaces were run and carried out and just lived out are very similar to the motto of our home, which is to be a lighthouse, which in a sense is like an orphan house. I wouldn't typically use that language, but our home is truly meant to be a safe space for not just our family, which is a multiracial family. Our two oldest kids, which are 18 and 16, are biological children, and our two youngest are orphans by blood, I guess. Their biological parents are from China and were unable to care for them. And so they came to us when they were only a year and a half old and have been with us ever since. And so we get to be a part of living out, in a sense, social justice, but really I would call it more restorative justice, which again is part of the DNA of what the Wesley movement was all about. And while I recognize that Methodists were never meant or intended to be called Methodist, it is, in a sense, a beautiful way to describe passion and devotion and dedication to a lifestyle that was devoted to accountability, to living out who we are as God's people. And so as I was pondering what part of Methodist history in the early season of this movement I was both moved by and wanted to research, and it is the life of Grace Murray and the way that she lived out her life, and also just the tragedy of her story as a female leader in the body of Christ. She was a woman of courage and a woman who was willing to go against the social norms of the time to be a class leader and to just engage in social justice and to preach and to teach and do all the things that she was told were not acceptable for a female to do. But one of the key pieces of her story that I'm very fascinated by after reading her biography is the error, as it says, of the ways and the tragedy that came, that she truly was John Wesley's love, and he lost that love because of a unnecessary maybe belief or conviction around women being somehow a threat to ministry. And this is a struggle that I have had throughout my whole journey in the church, not realizing that it was a struggle until more recently. And as I tell you that story, and come along with me to see more of our home and how I have reimagined what life is like living in this neighborhood and becoming a pastor across the street at Cathedral of the Rockies. Here on the porch is where I often read, and one of those books that I have read is 100 Years Methodism. This book I found in the library across the street at the church, which again is something very common in the multi-purpose buildings that were used in the early church, that we had libraries, and we also have a library. Yes, I am the nerd who has in my office the hymnal and journals by John Wesley and the books of the sermons and the anthologies of that. And yes, just am very fascinated by this, and found this particular book in our archives. So again, I am very intrigued by what one author called the more of an anecdotal or somewhat of an ancient, I guess this isn't really ancient biography, but the concept of that type of writing, like when the Gospels were written, where we're not necessarily looking at all the fine details of someone's story, but more the way they lived and what their legacy would have been, and not so much the key details of John Wesley's life, and more particular Grace Murphy's life, or Murray, sorry, but a way of life, and a way of life that was devoted to the community and devoted to loving others and seeing needs and living out communal sanctification, and not just focusing on self. And so again, I'm just very fascinated by the false perception that somehow Grace Murray was a threat to John Wesley's ministry. And I see it also as a tragedy that his brother would betray him in a sense and convince her not to marry him, even though she was willing, as she did, to travel with him and to be so dedicated to a life of ministry, which is what she was willing to do. And so I have a heart to reimagine what it looks like to be a female leader in today's context in Boise, Idaho, by extending the ministry of our home to the gathering of God's people across the street. That, again, you can see is just right there across the street. The Cathedral of the Rockies, the United Methodist Church that takes up an entire city block. What does it mean to extend the ministry of our home, being a lighthouse, to a space there? And so I'd like to invite you inside, and then we'll walk across the street to hear more about how in this time I am organically figuring out what that means, because the reality is I've only been on staff for a little bit over the amount of time that I've been in the United Methodist history class with you all. So let's come inside, and as you can see, it says "Let Love Grow" just right there on the front door. But when you come in, yes, there's our family dog Mochi, and you can see right inside our home is a painting. It's a watercolor of our home, and it says "A Home to All," which, if you can remember from the early part of my video, the door to the church says something similar that says "All means all." But if you look above, this is what our home looked like when it was first moved to this location from downtown and restored. And so I find this very much symbolic of our call to be the body of Christ in this community, and that is to create safe spaces that are filled with hospitality that really are experienced as a home to all. And across the street at Cathedral of the Rockies, we talk about God's house, our home, which makes us God's household. And here is the kitchen, where I spend a lot of time with the neighborhood folk, largely the teenagers that gather here before school and after school and at lunchtime with my other teenagers. And if you can see here, I'll show you in a bit a photograph of where a group of teenagers, including my 16-year-old son, wore these Care Bear costumes to the church trunk or treat the other day. And I intentionally just left the balloons and the mess from trunk or treat just right here. And so let's walk back across the street, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the ministry of presence and the impact that it's had in our neighborhood, and why I have extended this into my ministry across the street. Oh, and with us, we'll take this pile of coats that one of the neighbors left on the front porch for the homeless community. So here's my shortened version of the story as we walk across the street, and why I am so intrigued by Grace Marie, and my heart just breaks over her story that she was not able to marry the leader of the movement of Methodism because it would hinder somehow his ministry, when in reality there's so much that us women have to offer the body of Christ if we were given the opportunity. And so here it is. I finished my doctorate work through Kairos back in March, and was on a run with my neighborhood friend, again, another neighborhood connection, and she's on staff here. Again, here's how close we live. And she's on staff here, and her role is for hospitality, and she runs the front desk throughout the week. And our lobby is open to the unhoused population throughout the week, so that they can have a place of physical safety, really, and to be out of the elements. So it's like a safe physical place is what was offered. And I was on a run with Andrea one day, and I asked her, this is back in probably April, what would it be like, or what would happen if there was a pastoral presence in the lobby? And while I was waiting to find out what it was that I was supposed to do with my time after finishing my doctorate, I went and asked permission by the senior pastor if I could be a pastoral presence in the lobby. And so I would go and I would have coffee at least 2 or 3 times a week and just chat with the unhoused friends that were there. And I surveyed them in the beginning and probably talked to about 20 and asked, what is it that you need? How can we better support you? And without a doubt, what the common thread was of what almost everyone said could be summarized in two things. One, they were asking for hope, and two, they were asking for breakfast, because at that time we were, again, a safe physical space in the lobby and we offered coffee, but outside of that we weren't really engaging a whole lot with them. And so hope and breakfast, those are two things I can do. And so since then I have rallied a crew of multiple people who, it's funny, all of our names start with J, but we have a counselor and we have another pastor, actually two pastors, who come with me, and we take turns having coffee in the lobby and just showing people value and praying over them and with them and hearing their stories, and sometimes just being a compassionate witness to where they are. But really what we get to do is this. Remember these four things: that you are loved by and matter to God. No crisis will last forever. There's always hope, and others can help. Just ask. I think that'll be backwards, but whatever. And anyway, what we have found in the last 6 months, after we added this relational connection aspect to our ministry, reimagining what it looks like to be a space here that's safe to the unhoused relationally as well, and help transition them from feeling like guests in our building. Again, similar to the new room and to the foundry and to the orphanage house, like opening our doors, but not just offering basic needs, but relationally connecting and helping people to feel not like just guests, but also a part of the family. Because again, this building may be the house of God, but we, the people, are the household of God, and to experience that more. And one of the things that I did yesterday is invited a whole bunch more of the community to be offering and providing clothing. Here's some winter coats that I'm going to add to the pile as we go inside. But not just tapping into the congregation to provide these needs, but also an invitation to ask others in the community to participate. And instead of going to the congregation and asking for one more thing, because this crew, they love big and boldly, but to provide breakfast, I went out and asked for others to partner with, other churches and other neighborhood crew. And so now we have a rotation. In just the last few weeks, we figured out a rotation that now there's breakfast every morning. And as we sit at the table, all means all are welcome at the table, and we are showing value to people. And in the short bit of time that I've been doing this, we have already had to double the amount of money that the church is budgeting for lunches, because we also pass out lunches to this crew. And so a friend of mine who is a retired pastor, what he named what I have reimagined is an extension of our home, and that is the ministry of presence and the relational connection that's added. And so here we have All Means All, as you can see up on the doors as we go inside, and I will show you where the crew hangs out here. And this is the gentleman who's manning the desk. There's Shane. Hi, Shane. And here's the lobby where the crew gathers throughout the morning, every morning. So Mondays through Friday, as well as Sunday morning, we have the lobby open to our unhoused friends. And here, right here, is a space where I am able to sit throughout the week. And if any time someone asks to see a pastor, I'm generally the first one available to be the ministry of presence. And there at the coffee bar, one of the crew who has volunteered to provide breakfast is actually my mother-in-law, and she sets up a griddle right there at the coffee bar to make pancakes every Monday morning. And here in this, the light is off, but here in that space earlier today, we gathered as a group of all the volunteers who, I think there's like 20 of them that sit up at the front desk and are of the face of the church, who are the face of hospitality as the unhoused crew comes in. And here you have my office. There it is. Come on in. And it's fun to, oh, sorry. Nope. I just want you guys to say hi really fast. Can I grab my computer?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, usually she was just here in the morning, so I was wondering if she was still
I just
here.
needed to get this.
Thank you. Have a great night.
See you.
Bye.
I'm gonna leave all these here. I'll tell you. Yeah. I didn't realize they were in there, but that's a good reminder to tell you a little bit more. And that is one of our unhoused friends and one of the friends on our team. And as you got to see, they're hanging out in my office. And I just interrupted counseling. I didn't mean to do that, but that is one of the volunteers who is doing the things she does, and part of the ministry that has just developed in the last 2 months of the Ministry of Presence. So she's one of the crew. But I'm going to pause right here on this church pew that is in the hallway on the way back. I'm kind of out of breath because this place is so giant. But I have a few pictures that I want to show you of here. The tragedy of errors. It does truly break my heart of what this story tells. But here's some of the characters, the teenagers that hang in our home that came and went to the trunk or treat, as I mentioned earlier, with us. My son is the brown Care Bear. And if you peek right here, here's one of our sanctuaries. And during an organ concert last Friday night, I sat, and I'm the nerd who read the hymnal, so fascinated by all the theology that is being taught through the songs that the Wesleys wrote, particularly Charles Wesley. But this picture is a symbol that it could have looked different for Grace Murray, and reimagining what life is like being a female leader and a female pastor in a committed marriage where both partners are committed to a life of ministry. And here's my husband, who is committed to living out this story together. And here we are when we became members of the Methodist Church with our crew and living this story together. And it really is an option. And these are some of the other faces of people who are impacted from the lobby ministry. This is a mama who has poured out her heart and asked for prayer and her son. And yes, I did ask permission to take that picture. And this is Pancake Day. And so, just want to remind you, there's my mother-in-law making pancakes, that it really is a possibility for women to use their gifts and to live a life that is a life of devotion and passion and using these buildings for multi-purpose that maybe we don't live here, but I suppose we've reimagined what it looks like to live across the street and also live out holy sanctification, holy piety, and social piety as well. And while I don't participate in class meetings in the same way, I realized I was asked the other day if I am in any small groups, and the reality is I counted 6, that I am in one-on-one spiritual direction, one-on-one mentoring relationship, and also am on a podcast team that researches and records in my office that we visited earlier and interrupted, which was unfortunate. But also I am in a Kairos cohort that meets in that same space that we popped in for just a minute, and that while it looks different in this context, I don't think we could ask people to have membership tickets in the same way that the early Methodists did for their gatherings in small groups. That we can reimagine and hold true to the deep-rooted principles of social justice while living out holy piety individually and being accountable. And we can do that in married relationships. So again, I'm just heartbroken over Grace Murray's story and would love to see it look different in the lives of women moving forward. And so I'm committed to being one of those women who helps change the narrative that we are more than domestic helpers.